Now, you have our submission, but I'd like to draw your attention to two issues. The first is the important issue of access to lawyers for people in aged care, hospitals and other accommodation subject to restrictions on visitors. Under earlier directives, legal practitioners were permitted to visit clients in these settings. Currently, we are not. The provision allowing for the remote execution of wills has expired. So the effect of this is that a lawyer cannot attend upon a person living in one of these settings to take instructions for and arrange execution of a will. This is a serious and urgent issue that requires immediate remedy. The second issue is the need for improved scrutiny and oversight to ensure that the limitations placed on human rights by the emergency response remain justifiable and proportionate. Legislation was passed urgently in an emergency period, which imposed significant restrictions on fundamental human rights, such as the right to freedom of movement, the right to enjoyment of property, and the right to humane treatment in detention. The usual systems of checks and balances has been suspended. Effectively, the rule of law has been suspended because a range of decisions of executive government have been put beyond challenge. The extension proposed by this bill would see that suspension continue for more than 2 years, and this is not appropriate. There's no doubt that the public health threat from the pandemic is present and evolving, and executive government does continue to need the capacity to respond swiftly and flexibly. However, it's time that some important elements of the rule of law are reinstated. We've had the opportunity to review the submissions made to this inquiry, and we support the submissions of the Queensland Human Rights Commission generally, and in particular, the need for further safeguards, the need for a review process for people issued directions to isolate, and the need for humane treatment in detention. Finally, we call for better scrutiny and oversight over all COVID-19 related legislation and executive action by a parliamentary committee. This committee should be able to inquire into these matters without a specific referral from the government and should be able to receive submissions by the public.
Thank you very much.
Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shearer. And the Deputy Chair, you have a question?
Yes, I do, Madam President, to a matter that you raised in terms of this legislation will extend what you sort of indicated was a breach of the rule of law for 2 years. Could you explain to the committee what areas so far in our 18-month period of this extended, strong legislation to respond to the pandemic and the crisis, as it were, that was necessary for this legislation. Could you identify those issues in the past 18 months that this legislation has raised?
Well, I think the issues are very succinctly explained in the Human Rights Commission submission, but the ones of particular concern are the freedom of movement, and the the property rights, and also the treatment of people in detention. So they're the three ones that I'd highlight. Now, it's all a matter of balance, and in extraordinary times in a democracy, we accept that the executive government can do things that in other times would be not appropriate. So but as the situation evolves and it becomes, still a very serious situation, but without the need to do things as quickly as were done in response to the emergency, it's time for some of those checks and balances to be reinstated, we would say. And in particular, there are decisions of executive government now that are not subject to any review. And one of the usual hallmarks of a democracy like ours is checks and balances subject to review for decisions. And that's not able to occur at the moment.